Okay, I guess we have everybody back. What I'm going to talk about now is getting into using the defibrillator. So earlier I had said to you that using CPR doesn't save a lot of people. It's a very low survival rate, but when you combine that with using the defibrillator, it jumps up tenfold. And so what we're going to look at now is using that defibrillator. Going back to what we had with our patient, first thing that we did was find out if they were responsive or not. And if they are not responsive, then that's an emergency and we call 911 or have someone else call 911. That someone else should also be sent to get the defibrillator. So they're calling 911 while they're going to get the defibrillator. Folks that are here, if you know, help me out with a location. I know we've got one here. One at the softball field by the pickleball. Is there one at the pool? Okay, so you've got 4. Okay, so you've got 5. That's great. I know over in Plantation, we have 6 of them, and we have a newsletter that comes out to the community every month, and they always list it right in the side, the first page, the location of all the defibrillators in Plantation. So, good. That's a great idea. So, anyway, the CPR is designed to keep the patient viable until that machine shows up, because the patient in sudden cardiac arrest is either in ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia. And the only thing that fixes it is not CPR, it's defibrillation. And so we're going to do CPR to keep that oxygen flowing to the brain until that machine shows up. So when the machine shows up, I'm going to stop doing CPR. Because remember, CPR doesn't fix him. This is what fixes him. So as soon as the defibrillator shows up, I stop doing CPR and I open up the defibrillator. Now, I might be in a place, maybe I'm down at Orlando Airport and someone collapses. Well, they've got public access defibrillators, PADs, that are hanging on the walls in different areas, and other public buildings. There are public access defibrillators. And they operate the same as an AED. So the first thing we have to do is just open the silly thing up and turn the power on. Now, even if you've never seen this machine before, there's only 3 buttons on it. What would you think is the power button? The green one, so let's turn it on.
Adult patient. If the patient is a child, press the child button.
That would be the gray one.
Remove clothing from the patient's chest. Remove packet and apply pads on the patient's bare skin. Apply pads as shown in the pictures.
I'm getting there.
Remove packet and apply pads onto patient's bare skin. Apply pads as shown in the pictures.
There's a picture.
Press pads firmly on skin.
Okay.
Apply pads as shown in the picture. Press pads firmly on skin. Do not touch the patient. Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. Analyzing heart rhythm. Shock advised. Do not touch the patient. Everyone clear. Press the flashing shock button. Press the shock button now.
Everyone clear?
Shock delivered. Begin CPR. Ten. 20. 30. Give 2 breaths. 10.
That's going to keep counting for me and tell me to do CPR for 2 minutes. At the end of 2 minutes, it's going to say, stand clear, analyzing now.
So analyze again.
Yep, every 2 minutes. Now, if you were listening, it said, stand clear in 2 cases. 2 times it said that. What was the first time? It was analyzing, right? What is it analyzing? It's analyzing the electrical rhythm in the heart, okay? The electrical rhythm in the heart. It doesn't know if the patient's breathing. It doesn't know if the patient has a pulse. All it's looking for is the electrical activity that's going on in the heart. Remember, I told you earlier, there's only 2 rhythms that are shockable: ventricular fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia. That's programmed to look for those 2 rhythms. If it finds either one of those rhythms, it will say shock advised, and then it will power up. If it finds one of the other 84 rhythms, it says no shock advised, begin CPR. The protocols now are you shock once and go to 2 minutes of CPR. At the end of 2 minutes, it will reanalyze to see if another shock is advised. But the protocols starting in 2020, we used to do shock, shock, shock. They would do a shock, analyze. If it called for it, you'd do a second shock. It would analyze. If it called for it, it would do a third shock. And then you'd go right to CPR. That all changed in 2010, and now it is 1 shock, 2 minutes of CPR. Analyze, 1 shock, 2 minutes of CPR, analyze. Well, if they wake up, guess what? They have a heart rhythm, and guess what? The machine's going to say no shock advised, right? It won't even power up anymore. See, that's the beauty of these machines. You cannot shock them inadvertently. There's no possible way you can do that. I could stand here and punch this shock button all day long and nothing's going to happen. This has to power up first and tell me to shock before it'll even deliver one. So it doesn't matter if I push this by accident or not, it's not going to shock the patient. And it'll only shock them if it's called for. It's only going to look for electrical impulses. And when the electrical impulses change from ventricular fibrillation to normal sinus rhythm, it'll say no shock advised. Or even if it goes into one of the other 84 rhythms, like pulseless electrical activity, it'll say CPR. It will not. After it analyzes, it says, is it one of these 2 rhythms? Nope, it's one of the other 84. Okay, start CPR. Or if it is one of those 2 rhythms, it'll say shock is advised, and it will power up, and then it'll say push to shock. Okay, so every 2 minutes it's going to analyze and going to say, should it shock or shouldn't it shock? It'll make that decision, and then it'll tell you accordingly until the battery wears out, which is about 50 shocks. We'll never get that far. The most that we ever did in the field was 9. And that's because that's what the protocol said. The maximum number that we were allowed to shock in the field was 9. And then we had to do CPR. That's called asystole. It's flatline, like you see in the movies and on TV. Somebody, if they're hooked up to the heart monitor in the hospital or talking to the family, and you hear beep, beep, and you see the line on the machine, beep, 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 and then all of a sudden they and what do you hear next? Beep, and it's a flat line, right? That's called asystole. And asystole is not shockable. That's why when you see the movies and the TV, they're feeding you a lie. Because what do they do in the movies and the TV? Nurse, 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 and the family, and the nurse comes running in with a crash cart with a defibrillator and paddles, and she immediately puts them on the guy's chest and she punches the shock button. What happened? Well, that's not realistic because the defibrillator will not shock asystole, and asystole is flatline. And what happens is the defibrillator no longer is useful, and that's when they have to give cardiac medication to stimulate the electrical activity in the heart. So that's when we get into every little boy must pee soon. Those are all of the drugs that we give. Every is epinephrine. Little is lidocaine. Boy is beryllium. Must is magnesium sulfate. P is procainamide. And soon is sulfa. You have to give all of those things in that order in order to trigger the electrical rhythms to start up again.